I'm Sven Masterson, professional mentor and men's coach. And what you're about to see is a dialogue between myself and fellow men's coach Matt Epsky. Now, this video is not going to make a ton of sense to you if you haven't watched the video that this is a response to or a follow-up to. In that video, my wife and I spent about 90 minutes talking to an audience of men about our 30 years together, how we turned our marriage from mayday to payday, and the mindsets and behaviors and whatnot I had to move away from in that 30 years and move towards in order to make that work. And in that same conversation, you're able to hear an unscripted response from my wife and how all this kind of was for her, the same journey, what she learned about herself, what she learned about me in the process. And so if you want to understand this conversation that Matt and I are about to have in this video, I would encourage you first just to stop and go watch that presentation. If you want to, it's long, so maybe listen to it on 1.5 speed, something like that if you're in a hurry. But this conversation that we're about to have will make far more sense if you've watched that first. So I'll see you at the end of the video when I'll have an invitation for you to connect and hang in tight. I'll see you then. Take care.
Hey, Sven. I am going to get myself into angry, insecure, you have it easy, and you have no idea what I'm going through mode. Okay. And try to channel some of my inner jealousy into these questions because I think if I'm having them, I think other guys might have them.
What's the context? Why don't you tell our viewers about what you're talking about?
This was about our call, your call yesterday, where you and your lovely wife showed us what the dream would be like if we suddenly got along and had connection and had some intimacy and openness and honesty. And we all watched that course on, what was it on again? I forgot because I'm so blinded by jealousy. The name of the thing what yesterday was.
Oh, the live tribe call. Yeah.
Yeah, the live tribe call was, what was it? Like
about how to move from mayday to payday. Yeah.
That's right. Mayday to payday. Yeah. And I think I watched a lot of payday and I go, must be nice for him.
It's so funny because I guess we all have a bias for our life, right? So I love my life, don't get me wrong. And I'm very grateful for it. But it's always funny to hear other people think about what what feels like a normal day for you as payday. Yeah. I mean, I'm aware conceptually that people feel that way, but I also know that my wife was getting over COVID. She wasn't feeling her best. Right. And everybody's describing this feeling they got. And it's a little comical to me, but
Sven, I'll say, I love you. I've known you for about 4 years now, maybe 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. And I know a lot about your story, and I'm going to pretend I don't.
Okay.
And I'm going to challenge you on some of the things I saw yesterday. That's
great. Let's do it. Let's do it. Because if you knowing me, and plus, for the person not knowing you watching this, as a professional coach yourself, you're very aware of what a man watching a couple like my wife and I talk is thinking, right? Those pain points. So yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So my first question or statement is, you're lucky to have a wife like Zelda. She seemed mature and open to talk about these things. And she was kind and she kind of looked at you with these loving eyes. And my wife is not like that. She's cold and distant. And I can't get her to open up. I can't talk to her about anything. And you're telling me that I'm supposed to do something different when it's obviously her fault. Well, I mean, your wife is completely different than mine. And by the way, guys, I'm not married. I'm channeling my inner old marriage.
Yeah. I think it's a reasonable thing to think, and I not only could say I would think the same, I did think the same. Every man has a story of dysfunction, meaning every man tends to see at some point in his relationship with his wife a long list of things that are disagreeable, he becomes disillusioned by, and I was no exception. And it wasn't just me. And this is the important thing I want to tell people watching. If you've watched this video with my wife and I, is, and I didn't really want to necessarily get into this with her, because I think there's some things that are just hurtful for a woman to hear, even with healing. But everybody in my life, family, friends, close acquaintances, her family, lots of people affirmed that she was not at all pleasant to be around, right? So it's not just that, like, I mean, I had my own issues to sort out here, right? But I want to be really clear in explaining that everybody else from the outside still saw what looked like what I saw at the time, and were agreeable to, like, yeah, dude, I can appreciate your problem. She's this, she's that, right? They weren't, I didn't really abide people being mean, just that plenty of people affirmed that my grievances were legit. That she was, you know, cold, that she was not at all tender, right? That she was a little sharp sometimes, snarky, unkind. You pick your adjective, right? She was all these things. So I know how it looks now, like, oh, you're just lucky, but it wasn't always like that, and it wasn't like that for 2 decades. So I sympathize with men that are believing this. But what I had to learn was, because what that made me do, Matt, was I thought, oh, the wrong woman, right? So then I would see women that, like, had the attributes I was really drawn to: softness, nurturing, caring, kind of like that little bit of a flowiness that, you know, women have. And I would just be like, it was like crack, like, oh, I got to be around that, right? And I thought, well, I guess my wife's not like this. That was my conclusion. And that woman is. Go ahead.
So was the version of Zelda earlier on a different version than what we saw yesterday?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. That's my point. It's like, it's easy to look at her now and say, what's going on? In fact, you know, a lot of colleagues and a lot of clients, including you as a colleague, have been to my home and spent time with my family. And I remember the first time another colleague and coach came, he's like, what was your problem, dude? It's like, how could you have been like this? You know, because he met her and he met her, and that's how she is now. And he just thought I was the biggest loser jerk in the world for thinking poorly. And part of that is true. Like, but yeah, I'm not the same person, and she's not the person. What I didn't understand, though, was the relationship between those two things, that I had to become a different me in order to, like, unlock the door for her to become a different her. Right. And it's not, let me clarify it, not a different her. I believe that I ultimately had to become who I've always been underneath the crud, right? Underneath shame and fear and anxiety and insecurity. And that there's a version of her that you see now that was what was there underneath of her shame, fear, anxiety, and insecurity. So you got two people in this, I like to call it gridlock, where they're both, like, completely in this quagmire of not living their best. And there you are, right? It's checkmate. And so somebody has to go first in that. And that was the big aha moment for me, was stop focusing on the gridlock and the relationship tension and how she's this and she's that, she's this and she's that, and she's not enough of this, and she would stop doing that. And instead focus on, I got to take care of me. So it's this inside game, right? And I had to get up. I had to get so super serious about that I just forgot about all the stuff that I didn't think I liked about her and whatnot, right? And it felt like a wager. It really did. It felt like, and I wrote an article about this on my blog, actually, about, I felt like I was bidding on this big opaque box on, like, eBay, right? Where you're betting on your future. You have no idea what's in that box. It could be venomous vipers, sorry. It could be bliss. It could be pain and suffering. You don't know, but you're bidding on it. And every time you want to bid a little bit more, it's like on eBay, the bid goes right up and you're like, oh, I got to bid more, until like at the very end, everything you have is now bid. You're like, oh, here I go. Like, I'm bidding everything that this is going to work, right? That a future with this person that does not at all look probable is actually inside that box, what I want, right? So I did that. I set my nose to the task of just me, right? And what I found day to day is, like, I would experience a renewal in me, and then I would see a change in her. I was like, this doesn't make much sense, right? She was getting some help apparently for like postpartum stuff and whatnot, but it's not like she didn't get coaching. She wasn't like, hey, fix my marriage. In fact, she had like, I'm done focusing on the marriage kind of thing. She was checked out. And what she didn't explain in that video, she was like an angry checked out at the time, right? She really did like have an F off attitude to everybody, including my kids to a degree, right? That's just where she was. It was like all about, she's got to protect herself. So it was a really hard time, but I started seeing all that turn around. Like, I'd get some healing in some area, and I would focus on being more open, showing more high regard, right? Which I could do because the needle would move for me, where I could show myself a little bit more high regard. I'd turn around and be like, okay, I'm at a higher position now in how I feel about me. Let me treat her this way. And then it would be like something in her characteristics would open up, right? And it was a lot like, I use the example a lot, which maybe my audience doesn't care about, but since I live on a homestead, we grow a lot of our food. Every time I learn to be a better gardener, I get better produce. And it's not because the produce changed. It's because my ability to cultivate what's innately in that seed has changed, right? So if I plant a tomato seed and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, you might occasionally get lucky and you might get a tomato, but it might not be the best tomato because you don't know like what nutrients would really lead to a juicy tomato. And that's how I was living my marriage, just like, like throw seed on the ground and see what happens, like expecting to have all this abundant harvest of what I wanted in life with absolutely no wisdom or skills in how I cultivated. But yet I thought I had wisdom and skills because people told me, oh, you're such a good husband. You're such a good man, blah, 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 blah. Right? But they must have had really low standards, all of them.
Did you ever talk to her about this? Did you ever be like, hey, I noticed some changes in you, or I want to see these changes? Did you ever lay any of this stuff out?
No.
Like, I'm going to do this work and I expect you to do yours kind of thing?
No, in fact, that's one reason I'm hugely in favor of not doing so. What I found is sometimes I wanted to, but I believe in men, and you probably have seen this too. We want to talk when we don't want to act, right? We're usually talking when we're hoping to preserve doing something difficult, or so that we can solve some sort of inner discomfort. But no, I never talked to her about it. I never actually told her, hey, have you noticed anything? I didn't do any of that stuff. It was like, I just carried on my business because I really was on an internal journey. I just put the whole idea of marriage aside. Like, I wasn't cold, but absolutely no talking about like us, the relationship, her, no expectations whatsoever.
I can't stress this enough. What I'm hearing is I actually saw her change in front of me to what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
And I didn't give a shit. Like, I didn't pay attention to it. I just went back to my own lane and kept working on me.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep. Yes.
How did you keep your attention off of her? All of a sudden she's kissing your neck and blowing, winks your way and stuff. Like,
I'm just talking about, I still gave her attention. We started a relationship. I'm just saying, I gave no attention to what she should or needed to do. Like, to me, and that was directly related to one of the most transformative, pivotal things for me in perspectives was everything in life is about you. I don't mean in a arrogant selfishness, just that the only way you're experiencing everything in your life is in the context of you, right? So like, to reach into somebody else's story and think that you should have a concern about it, if you think about philosophically, is kind of arrogant, right? Like,
I noticed that yesterday, that she even brought up, she's like, I have my own life. I want to go read my gardening, but I don't, she didn't even want your whole life to be constantly about you.
no.
The question came up yesterday was how much time do you spend together? She's like, what? I never think about that.
Even
Like,
after the
never.
call, she's like, she was like still thinking about it. She's like, yeah. She's like, I have no idea. She's like, that's weird to me that people would think about that.
But did she always have a independent mindset, or is that something you cultivated by respecting her individuality?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I think every good virtue my wife has, she's always had. That's part of my philosophy, in that it's in the DNA of each of us is good, right? And I know some people take issue with that, but I believe at your core is every good thing that could be in a human. Because for me, from a faith perspective, I believe if you're made in the image of something that created you, and that thing has every good attribute, well, then it's all possible in Matt, right?
Yeah.
So I took that same kind of to her, and I started to think, if there's something I want in a woman, I believe it's in the DNA of her, because it comes from a single source. You follow me so far? Like, let's call it spiritual DNA.
So there is no better woman out there for you. They're all the same. They all have the inherent goodness the same, kind of.
I believe this, and I believe it's testable in the clientele I've worked with, because my clients are always like, this dude is crazy, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, listen, let's stop focusing on what's possible in your wife, because it's really ultimately about, what do you believe about you? See, the reason you believe that some women are good and some aren't is because you believe some men are good and some aren't. The problem is, there's a huge problem in that philosophy, which is there's rules for what makes a good man and not a good man. And how do you know that you qualify as the good man and not the piece of crap man, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that worldview is bankrupt, in that it leads you smack down the roadway of a life of fatigue and comparison and constantly wondering, am I good enough? Right. And then you give all your energy to trying to be better than other people so you can feel decent, like you deserve love. Well, the hell with that. Like, that's exhausting. Right. So when guys abandon that whole thing and they come back to, well, what if every possibly good attribute is in me?
Yeah.
Like in my core, right? My consciousness. Well, if that's true about me, then I can be everything that is good, meaning like I could find it and cultivate it.
Yeah.
Well, if that's true for me, then it's true for her, right? So I'm not saying it's always a good idea. You might say, this woman has had so much going on that I don't want to do that. Like, right? And by way of metaphor, it'd be like if I took the absolute worst part of my land that had absolutely no fertility. Yes, could I make it work? Might not want to. So I tell guys all the time, you have to decide that's what you want to do, right? But I believe that you can cultivate up and out any characteristic in a woman that is a legitimate characteristic, right? Meaning, I don't think it could be self-serving. I think you have to be acknowledging that, like compassionate, for example, is a great one. Kindness, care, nurturing, softness. I believe all these are just like, they're part of the feminine, that even if a woman doesn't know that part of herself, it doesn't mean it's not there. Right. It just means I might have to learn how to draw that up and out. Right.
So kind of going back into your paragraph there, it sounds like judgment needed to be removed. And I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's like there's a big piece of judgment that is almost cancer to any way you view another human being.
100%.
And it's also a cancer back at you, right?
Yeah,
if
because
you're going
it
to
starts
judge
in here anyway.
What's that?
It starts in there anyway. The only reason you're judging other people is because you carry an internal judgment of self.
Of self, right? Yep,
same
so
yard.
Did you stop judging your wife as this evil, angry, cold creature and just give it up? Just like I stop trying to define her. I don't know what she is. I'm gonna just let her be what she is.
Yep. And that's been liberating on a lot of levels, because it's only possible because I had the same transformation first internally, meaning like I I stopped judging me, right? Which was the hard part. After you stop judging you, I'll suggest to you and bet you, when you don't judge you anymore, you don't judge other people anymore.
So
when you find yourself judging other people, you're finding, oh, here's an area I still judge me, right? So that was the journey, is getting that rooted out, which was a long and a little bit protracted journey. But that's actually what I do now, is help them with that. And then it's like, once we've done a good job with that, it's like a snowball effect. Like the woman in their life generally just feels it. The woman, I believe, feels that release of judgment, because that's where acceptance comes from, which is trustable. It means that you're not judging her anymore, so she could be herself. Right? She doesn't have to worry about like, oh, I can't say that. I can't have this look on my face, or he'll just lose his crap about it. So,
question for you on the thing of judgment. Do you think that you can decide right now to stop judging yourself, or is this a process? Like for a guy out there listening, and then we said, stop judging. I got two questions. One, who do you stop judging first, you or somebody else? And number two, does this happen right away? Can you just make a decision and move on from judgment?
I think you have to stop judging you first.
You gotta go
I think you can try to stop judging somebody else, and that would probably be valiant and worthwhile to do. But I don't believe it's going to be very effective long term until you learn to not judge you.
So
I don't think you can do that via just a simple decision. Pardon me, because there's a lot more to that. Meaning the way the human mind works, every belief you have is built on other beliefs, which are built on other beliefs, which are built on other beliefs. So there's kind of an irreducible minimum change of belief about the way you interpret life. And that has to happen for you to release judgment, because judgment is built on the belief that judgment is a worthy endeavor or accomplishes something good for you, right? So if you don't undermine why you judge, you'll keep judging, right? So I personally believe we judge because of shame, which is why I'm so shame oriented in my approach, which, because shame is the result of judging yourself, right? So like, there's a lot of that to work out. For me, it took a while. For the guys I work with, it takes usually about 6 months. Pardon me, I got a little tickle in my throat. Some people do it faster though. Some people just the way they've lived might actually make them have an easier time moving in the direction of no judgment, because they've sown those seeds over time, right? Some people have a lot harder time with judgment.
So it sounds like this is a key in a man's journey. If he wants, and I'm going to say this really weird, if he wants his wife to change, he needs to change. And the first thing that needs to go is judgment. And you help guys stop judging themselves.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of simplified.
Yeah, but think about it this way. It's funny that you said that. Even the desire to want my wife to change itself is judgment.
Ah, there you go.
Isn't it?
It? For sure. 100%.
Because you're really looking at another human being's story and saying, I think that story should be going a different way. Right? Now, if you think about the role you're taking on in the universe when you step into that, this is the insidious nature of judgment in general. It's very high-minded, right? To have such a belief. If you're a person that comes from like a religious or faith perspective, you'd have to say, well, you're basically taking the role of God. If you're from let's just say a God, maybe an atheistic or agnostic background, you are at the very least saying that you possess the standards by which other human beings should be passed or failed, right? That's still a very arrogant position, no matter what, when we want to believe that someone else should be living differently than they are. The one exception to this, and it's nuanced, is when you're a parent. When you're a parent, you're actually tasked with deciding what's in the best interest for another human being for a very short period of time, right? But outside of that, and that has its, its appropriateness and inappropriateness. I can't think of another time where judging another human being, unless you're ordained to this, you're like literally a judge or something like that. I don't personally believe that's helpful, and it is the thing that has to happen.
No, I love it. I got to move on just with one quick question for you, because it kind of was boiling up inside me as a guy in this kind of relationship. Was she didn't leave you, buddy. She didn't cheat on you. She didn't exit the marriage. You guys didn't separate. Mine did.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to do with that? Like, I want what you want. So
yeah, no. And well, we certainly have men in our community who did experience that, still got the same kind of result I have. So they would be the best to speak with, to hear a story that's possible. And I never try to fake that. I have helped a lot of those guys to that point. But I think that, and I wrote a whole article about, there's like 10 characteristics that a man has had in common that have had that journey. Right. And one of those is you have to decide that that's what you want. Right. And that's a hard thing to come to, because it's hard to let go of judgment for somebody who's hurt you. So whether my wife has ever left me or cheated on me is a thing, but it's not the leaving or cheating that is really causing the problem for a man. He thinks it is. It's that you've been hurt. And one thing I do have in common with men that have been cheated on or left is I've been hurt. My wife and all wives will at some point inflict a very difficult injury on you, or it feels like it anyway. What you're actually feeling, I'm going to suggest, is a lifetime of injury that you have, that has kind of come to the surface, right? That the thing that pricked the boil of the festering wound of shame in you was maybe cheating, or maybe her saying, I don't love you anymore, or leaving you. It could be a number of things. I got some of that, not a cheating, but like I said, I got that. I'm not really feeling the same way about you as a 23-year-old. And I was pretty devastated, but it was like, what am I going to do? Right. So, but what I felt in the way of pain, for 20 years was the pain of, here's what I thought it was you're not spending time with me. You prefer your reading, or, fill in the blanks. Cell phones 20 years ago weren't, a thing. So, but maybe reading was. So I felt utterly last in her life.
But you felt left. You had those feelings of, I've been left. I'm not.
Conceptually, it felt a little bit worse to be in a household with somebody who feels like they're not really into you. Right. But I was feeling my own story, meaning I think what happens with a lot of women is they're trying to show you love, but because of your own story that you bring into the relationship about not being lovable, you find a reason to excuse it and dismiss it as not sincere. So then you keep living in that, well, she doesn't really mean it kind of story. Lots of men do this, right? Well, it didn't, I think she's just saying that. They feel like they're getting pity, because what you're experiencing is your belief system, the feeling of your thinking every day, right? Well, that leads you to believe, if you grew up with a story that I'm abandoned, I'm rejected, nobody loves me, you'll live that way in your marriage. And maybe that's not your story and you still get cheated on. Then I still think ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about pain, and that part of any vulnerable relationship is people have the power to hurt you. And sometimes they do. Most of the time they do. I think every relationship will, if it goes long enough in the disillusionment stage, if it goes long enough to reach that, it's because there's been hurt. Yeah. But a lot of times what's hurting us too, Matt, is actually the comparison of the person in front of us with the expectations of what we thought they would be.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was hurt was from there. Like if you get married and you're like, oh, this is how it's going to be. This person's going to be like this. They're going to do this every day. They're going to do this once a week. This is what sex is going to look like. This is what's going to look like when I walk in the house from a hard day of work, and nothing goes that way. Mm-hmm. Think about it in your own story. What you're actually hurt by is that you had a thought. This is judgment, isn't it? That it would be like this, and it isn't. And that has a meaning, and that meaning means she's not a good person. And so, yeah, I have that in common, but I haven't felt cheated on in this relationship. In my youth, I certainly had relationships with girls that decided to do that. And I very much remember that pain, but that's a lot different than marriage. And I wouldn't try to pretend it's the same.
So I found in my story that the liberation is it's my pain and it's my story and it's my thinking that I'm living in. And I think for a lot of guys, that's helpful. And that's what I heard again from you, kind of reaffirmed, like we're living in the feelings of our thinking. And it's not, the problem isn't outside of you and her, it's actually inside of you and you.
Yeah. Well,
and it's hard to conceptualize and it hurts, but I'm telling brothers, I'm trying to pull you by the shirt sleeve over here and whisper in your ear. It's not her, it's inside of you.
It's about meaning, right? And meaning comes from stories we tell ourselves about things that happen. So if a woman cheats on you, you don't realize it's because it's a subconscious to a big degree, but your brain says, oh, here's why she did that. Yep. And that's a story that has a lot of blanks filled in where you're not good enough. Your genitals are too small, your bank account's too small, you're too short, you're too bald, you're too fat. Pick something, right? Yeah. And so you start to live in that, and that causes hurt. Yes. But it's because you actually looked at the actions of another human being and you made it about you. You made it personal. But what if nothing is ever personal? Ever? And this is hard for a lot of people to grapple with. But again, your life is an experience of yourself. So really everything you ever do is about you. Even if you're trying to hurt somebody, you're doing it for you, right? So if I punch you in the face, Matt, I'm punching you in the face because I feel something I'm thinking is going to feel better if I punch you in the face, right? So if you get an idea about this, and this is why I love the book, like the 4 Agreements, don't take anything personally. If you stop taking things personally, you realize people are always operating out of a sense of self and what they believe will improve self. Then you could just deflate actions they take as having significance about you, right? And just say like, hey, they did that because of them. Now, it could be that what they think about me, but it's what they think about me match the truth. So let's just say they did it. They're like, yeah, I did this because I think you're a horrible person. Okay. All the taking it personal aside, it still completely falls flat to the degree I don't believe I'm a horrible person. Like if you think I'm a horrible person, that only means something if I have space in my heart and mind to think maybe I'm a horrible person, right?
Right.
But if my view of self is solid, it's like, that's too bad that Matt thinks I'm a horrible person, but I don't feel like I'm a horrible person. Then I don't have any emotional pain about that.
Yeah, none. Right. Oh, I'm going to speak from the context of you just punched me. I'm the guy who got punched, right? It hurts, right? It's a physical pain. And
real
then,
pain.
Like they say in the second arrow is where the meaning is. And if the second arrow, the meaning that I place on it is I must be a terrible person because you punched me and I deserve that, then I'm going to be in double pain. But if I know I'm good and I know I'm whole, it's actually like, wow, what happened to Sven? He must be in a place of pain in order to do something like that to me. I'm not going to let it happen again, but I also understand that it's not me who was causing the harm. It was Sven who was being in harm, right? Is that what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I get it. And let's just break this down, right? Your wife calls you a lazy pile of shit because you sat on the couch, right? If you needed a break and you knew you weren't a lazy pile of shit, you could look at her and go, my gosh, she must really need something right now. If you think you're a piece of shit, you will defend the fact that you are a lazy piece of shit and you'll start arguing with her about how she's wrong. And that's the big difference. What's that?
It's judgment again. It's judgment. If you take judgment out of that completely, when it happens, you're just like, it's just like seeing a bird fly by the window. Oh, wonder where that bird's going. Like
curiosity. Yep.
There's nothing to it anymore because if you let go of judging you, you don't even have to ask the question, am I a lazy piece of shit? It's just like, I know that's incongruent with who I am. It might be describing my behavior, but in my worldview and the stories I help men cultivate for themselves, you aren't your behavior. There's a difference between your behavior and your person and your identity. Behavior is very fluid, and we're often not our best. Our behavior does not always or often reflect our best, right?
Right.
But mostly because of judgment. So if you let all that go, you don't judge what happened there. You don't judge any of that stuff. And you're just like, yeah. And then you can be curious. And when you're curious, now you have the opportunity to hear somebody's pain as actually evidence. Oh, why? And if you don't have to go internal and have all that inside yourself, then you can stay present with them in that pain and say, let's find out more about this. Is there a way I could actually show love? And this is why I have the relationship I do, because I'm very free. If my wife has a tone of voice that most people would interpret as anger or something, I don't take it personally. So I could get curious. And actually, instead of running like I did for 20 years, I moved forward. I moved towards it. Right. So I actually purposely then try to go and embrace her, pull her towards me so that I'm showing her love. Like Dita says, like almost all complaints a woman has is that she's not feeling love. Yeah. So if my wife is complaining in any way, I'm like, well, she needs to feel love. Let's bring her to me. Right.
It sounds like there's connection behind every pain statement and behind every accusation. There's connection. There's the opportunity for connection.
A desire for it, right? Like, why do you tell people why would you make it anybody else's deal? Like, right. Why would you ever tell me something if you're in pain? What would be the purpose?
So my cold, angry wife is begging for what?
I think she's begging for love, right?
Love and connection.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so you could look at her completely different if you had that mindset. She's looking for
That's why I say all the time. If men understood this, they would understand how much of what they call complaining is possibly foreplay. Because, and this is true, if you understand that there's a desire for connection and a desire to receive love from you, and you give that instead of going into the judgment and all that, right? Leaving actually your masculine birthplace, I would say, of just being okay, then you miss that opportunity. But a lot of times, if you just give what she needs, you're building the relationship, which actually is the path to getting the thing that you want in a relationship. But because your story makes you misinterpret why the woman in front of you is being angry, and you make it personal and you get hurt and you retreat and you go cold, it actually makes it worse because now she didn't get the connection she wanted from you. And now you don't have the connection with her that you've wanted. And this is why I'm saying we are sowing that as men, which is why I do not blame her. I sowed that by simply not understanding what it meant, not having, judging myself, judging her, wallowing in shame, having my own healing need to take place, all of that. You sort all that out, you see it all different, and it's pretty blissful.
I love that because it leads to my last question. It sounds like this was mostly your wrongdoing. I mean, she had postpartum depression. She's not an awful person. You said that she's internally good. She has a good reason to be sad at times, and she kind of yesterday said, it was mostly you. How does a guy live with that? How does a guy live with that?
Well, again, if you don't judge yourself, I can see that and affirm that it's true. I can live with it because I've addressed shame and judgment in my life, and I don't walk around with shame and judgment. I could look back and say, that's who I was. That's all I could have been at the moment. Thankfully, I didn't get stuck there, and I'm not there now. And I can appreciate the past. I don't feel like I wasted time. That's the thing. A lot of guys feel like, if I only known this earlier. Well, you didn't, and there's absolutely no benefit at all to judge what you did your earlier self, right? Again, it's judgment. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I know.
the only reason it's hard to deal with is because of judgment. If you take judgment out, you can accept it and actually enjoy it. It might sound really threatening to a lot of men, and a lot of men think, and I'm just going to answer this question preemptively. A lot of men think what I'm saying when I'm talking about this is a woman can do no wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying if I tie anything in me to waiting for her to stop doing whatever that is, I'm effectively paralyzed. I'm going to be waiting. I'm going to be in limbo, and I've now hitched the pony of the wagon of my well-being to her wagon, right? So I just don't focus on that at all. Focus on my own, and the release of all of that judgment is just, it cultivates good things, right? It's made me a better me, and I kind of liken it to a thermostat in the living room, right? If I walk in my house and I turn my thermostat up to 78 degrees, I get to feel that 78-degree heat, but everybody else in the house does too, including her, right? And you got to think like this, like whatever you set your insides to is how people will be able to relate to you. So we're trying to oftentimes enter this deep, meaningful connection of intimacy, emotionally mature from like really bad thermostat temperatures, because we're hoping that basically our wife is going to do all that. She's going to bring all that to the table. That's ridiculous, right? Why would a woman want to be with you if she's got to bring the majority of everything the relationship needs? Right? Now, a man says, well, how's it fair that I need to? Well, it's not that you need to bring it all, but you have to go first, right? It's like, and that's what she was talking about in that video, is go first, lead that way by setting the temperature and whatnot, do your work first and watch what happens. And this is not a fluke, right? I've helped a lot of guys with the same thing where, and you have too, we see this, if guys will just stop focusing on her, get you sorted out, get your thermostat set to a nice, comfortable, loving, non-judgmental, high regard, self-reliance, ownership temperature. It's like guys say all the time, it seems like magic. They're like, lo and behold, the woman in my life is being completely different to me now. And I'm always like, yeah, I know, we told you, right? But you have to cross some bridges of faith to get there, don't you? That's my question to you, right? Like, so can I ask you a question back?
Yeah. I'm going to answer the faith one too, because it's an easy answer if any guy is struggling with it. You don't want what you have now, so try something different. And I just had faith that if I'm the complete opposite of who I was, and I gave up judgment and I started accepting everything and I started looking at people as capable and loving human beings, like you said, I love the word, lo and behold, all of a sudden they just rise to the temperature that you've now created. And I love that statement. And I love spending time with a guy who's found ownership and acceptance in his life and is walking that path. So it was fun.
It helps me everywhere.
Fire away.
Yeah, not just in marriage. It helps me everywhere. Because the combination of ownership, self-reliance, high regard, which the trappings of that are the release of judgment, is anytime normally in life I would feel done unto, like somebody did something. It's like all that I could just set aside and be like, how do I want to be in this moment? Right. Correct. And that's like important in business. If ever I'm feeling at all victimized, I just like, well, what does ownership look like here? What's it look like to be the hero? And then you can quickly move out of victimization. And that's a big deal. I mean, if you realize how many places you're living in a victim role in your life that you can stop, is when you get your life back. Because you haven't really known life when your whole life is given to servicing victim stories in your head. You're spending all your time like working all that out. Okay, so my question back to you, wondering, because you said you're not married, right? How have and I know you to be a man that walks in the same kind of principles. How do you think these help a man that is divorced?
These principles?
The same things I'm talking about. How would they help a man who's it's too late? He's divorced, right? What do they do for him?
Oh my gosh, it gives you a life of freedom and love and happiness and joy and bliss. Like I don't know how to explain it. I never wanted to be divorced, but I would never trade how I walk through the day now for anything else, right? Like my kids are blessed. Everybody I come in contact is blessed. You know, the my work life is a blessing because of it. So
How about your
it's a,
relationship with your ex-wife?
my relationship with my ex-wife is wonderful. It's great. We're actually loving. We're good co-parents. We're good. And when I say co-parents, we're good co-parents in the form of like we have a partnership there. We want what's best for our kids. We still hang out, see each other, have conversations that are deep and meaningful. We actually want what's best for each other, which I think I know I want what's best for her. And you know what's funny is I believe she wants what's best for me. And for some guys that may be like, well, what are you talking about? Like I actually live in the mindset that I could call my ex-wife right now and say I need something like this, and she would be able to give it to me, you know, whether it be support or anything. So um I tell you, it transformed my relationships across the board. And it was, and I did this all by myself minus the coach, right? Like
Yeah,
I was
same.
alone. I was living in my parents' basement. I did the work on myself. I didn't talk to friends about my work. I didn't, you know, show off the work. I didn't have to puff up for anybody. I was just grinding out the work and ridding myself of the insecurity and the shame and understanding ownership and acceptance in my life. And it might have changed the people around me, but most importantly, it changed me. And that's,
Right.
I would never trade that for anything else.
Yep. Yeah, same. And having endured the 20 years of marriage without that, I wouldn't undo that. I wouldn't undo 7 years of really painful time for the same reason. It's like, hey, if that's what needed to happen to live like I live now, I'll do it again. Right.
Yeah, me too.
I do sometimes, it hasn't happened a lot lately. I know when I first got into this, sometimes I'd be like, man, these guys have really figured stuff out. You know, like guys, we take people through a lot faster than I did. Right. But at the same time, I wouldn't be helping guys with this. I wouldn't be doing what I do for a living now if I hadn't gone through the really protracted, painful. Like, let's make sure that you really understand misery really well so you can help people with misery. So some people are fortunate in that, you know, they have access to, you know, resources and whatnot. Or anybody else. I didn't, for whatever reason. I stopped lamenting it because it actually became the genesis for, you know, what we've gone on to create and whatnot with helping other men. I know that I'm tender to that. I put so much heart into it because I remember how painful it was.
Yeah.
So everything is redeemable, in my opinion.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. And they that's the meaning, right? Like your most meaningful work will be fruit from the tree of your most painful times.
Yeah, that's a lot of guys, you know, as I'm sure you run into, after a guy moves through his, you know, the crisis of his relationship, the number one thing guys talk to me about 100% are mission and purpose. And I say the same thing, like, stop looking for mission and purpose and like just what puts, what feels happy, but start actually looking where you experience the most pain and you felt the most need. And you'll probably find a place where, you know, kind of you're being called into entering that story with someone else.
Yeah.
And when men do that, they end up finding like, oh, wow, I feel more alive now than ever. And it's because they're connecting with somebody in a redemptive way and in a story that for them was very painful, which interestingly heals those places, right?
Yeah.
A huge part of my healing journey was actually that I parachuted right away accidentally into helping other men, and you did too, right? So I got clear quick because I was spending a lot of time just sharing what I was learning with other dudes.
Yeah.
Like it was a rocket fuel to my own journey. And that felt weird because you're trying to help people, but you haven't reached it yet, right? And that's okay. It's like you have taken steps behind you. So you're always qualified to share something that you've experienced, right? So you could say, hey, I was just there 10 minutes ago, but this is what it was like 10 minutes ago, right? Like that's helpful. It's really not, I think you actually serve people really well when you share from your experience, even if it's fresh experience, even if it's experience you're still going through right now. And so that's even shaped my practice to where I invite men to start, as part of their journey, start helping other men, because it's such a huge life changer to their own journey to do that, right? Where if you had to wait and be like, let's make sure you get qualified for X amount of years first before you start telling people things, you're depriving people of actually the experience that would help solidify the things they're trying to learn.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for the question back to me. And yeah, we'll talk again soon.
All right. If anything in this video resonated with you, if you're finding yourself frustrated in your marriage, if you're wondering if you can make your marriage work, it feels hopeless, it feels like, man, I just don't know. This guy, he's just a fluke, right? I want you to overcome that sensation and reach out. I've prepared a special page just for people that watch these videos that you can go to, where you can hit a button and basically connect with me. I'll give you about 60 to 90 minutes of free consultation. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I'll just hear your story, offer personalized, loving, and direct feedback to help you with the next step, whatever that is. You can engage in that right now by just going to svenmasterson.com/mayday. That's svenmasterson.com/mayday, all one word. You're going to see a welcome letter there that'll kind of confirm you're in the right place. If you read through that and you're like, man, this resonates with me, just go ahead and click the button. You're not going to get any kind of salesy process. You're not going to get put into a marketing funnel. You're just going to get basically a response that says, here's how you can get on my calendar. We'll schedule a call. You'll have that call, and it's that easy, right? And if you want to go further than that, well, we could talk about that another time. That's also ridiculously easy to do with me. But this is really just about helping you get your bearings, helping you determine what needs to happen next if you want to turn your own marriage from Mayday to payday. If this video has been helpful for you, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, maybe give me a thumbs up. And if you're really in a great mood, I would love to hear a comment. And even if it's not favorable, that's okay. Comments are welcome. Just be courteous, and I will look forward to seeing them. All right, I'll see you hopefully on the other side of that Zoom screen soon enough. Take care.